The charges leveled in Hindenburg 2.0 leading to a big political face-off between the opposition and the ruling BJP. Joining us now live on this broadcast is Praveen Chakravarty, chairperson of the Professionals Congress of the All India Congress Committee. Mr. Chakravarty, welcome to India Today. I want to start by placing before you the defense that we've heard from SEBI chairperson Madhuri Puri-Buch, and then what Hindenburg is saying on the back of it, and then we'll try and see whether the defense that's been put out stands to reason or not. So first and foremost, the SEBI chairperson says that the investment in the funds which were made, which are in question at the moment, were made in 2015 when they were both private citizens living in Singapore, and this happened almost 2 years before Buch joined SEBI as a whole-time member, let alone chairperson. So the SEBI chairperson, and you've been a successful professional in your own right. Now, before somebody assumes a post like that of regulator, if they've made some investments, and this is made in a fund, and it's the fund that ultimately goes out and takes investment decisions, you can't hold that person, that professional, a highly successful professional in her own right, accountable for what happened before she became regulator. So let that be the starting point of this conversation. Praveen Chakravarty.
Okay, Rahul, first let us understand the background and the context in which this is coming out. Okay, I am not saying Ms. Madhavi Buch is guilty or innocent. The background and the context in which this is happening is there is a certain research report that's come out that has put out documentation alleging something about the head of the securities market regulator. Now, this comes at a time, when does it come? When last year there was a very categorical report by many media houses, foreign media houses such as the Financial Times and Hindenburg, about Adani money laundering. There was nothing that we heard from SEBI. Next, personally, Mr. Rahul Gandhi and I did a press conference soon after the elections, and I placed data. I said volumes in the stock market on the 31st of May doubled. It is extremely rare for this to happen. In any market in the world, when such volumes go double, there will be at the very least an inquiry by the market regulator. We heard nothing. In this background and context, when somebody says there is perhaps some vested interest for the chairperson of the securities market regulator to not act, it is then incumbent upon the securities market regulator's head to prove innocence and, or at the very least, allow for an inquiry to be done. And how can an inquiry be done? An inquiry can be done only, both ethically and legally, only if the chairperson steps aside, resigns, or recuses herself from daily operations. And that is the correct thing to do.
So, as far as the inquiry is concerned, these are matters that have been taken up before the Supreme Court. New petitions are being filed to look at the new charges. I'll park that on the side. Let's take a look at the decision to invest in the fund in question. The SEBI chairperson says the chief investment officer of the fund, Anil Ahuja, was a childhood friend of the SEBI chairperson's husband, that they were at IIT Delhi together, that this is a Citibank, JP Morgan person, and that the fund in question has put out a statement to say that they never invested in any of the Adani counters.
Okay. My simple question is, why is Ms. Buch dealing with this issue through the media, and Rahul Kanwal is certainly not a lawyer?
Sure.
Why is the hesitation to undergo an inquiry in this? I'll tell you what I find very strange in a lot of these things. There's been an allegation that has been made. She can issue a response. Because of the position that she holds and because of the context, she did not even open her mouth about the stock market activity after exit, the day before exit polls. I presented data. When you say Supreme Court inquiry, no, the committee said we did not get evidence of end beneficiaries, which is the data that SEBI should have ideally provided.
Okay.
So I will not absolve her. So in this case, Why not conduct an inquiry? Why are you shying away from an inquiry?
Hold
And
that
why-
thought.
Why
Hold
is
that
the
thought.
Indian Venture Capital Association and the Association of Mutual Funds coming out and issuing statements in support of her? This is a personal matter of the head of the regulator with the research report.
Okay.
What business do these two industry bodies have to come and defend her? What do they know?
That of a highly successful professional coming in and doing a regulator's job. Before this, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and I say this with no disrespect to anybody else who held the chairperson's chair before this, was largely staffed by bureaucrats. Now, again, with no disrespect to IAS officers, their understanding of the markets, particularly the more sophisticated techniques that are now available, is limited because that's not their job. She was a highly successful investment professional in India, then abroad. And look at some of the moves that she's made, clamping down on futures and options, trying to safeguard retail investors, coming up with new kinds of mutual funds, which again can benefit investors. Now, those are the kind of brains that you want at the helm of a body like SEBI, as would be the case with any regulator. You want the best of the best to come in and give back after playing out a successful career. The moment these kind of questions are asked, it could potentially put off people in her weight category, given their success in a private corporate life, from wanting to come and do this job, because as SEBI chief, she really can't come out and defend herself or debate against you live.
Rahul, with all humility, may I say that I have had a similar track record, may not be successful by your definition. I don't know what the definition you use, but I've run a large foreign bank in India. I've been fairly credentialed with Ivy League degrees, and I was an investment professional earlier. To suggest that you can only get credentialed people from the private sector into public offices at the cost of integrity and probity is absolutely laughable. Absolutely laughable what you're suggesting.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm making a philosophical argument. No, so that you don't get me wrong. I'm saying you want to be able to attract talent such as that, the best of the best, to do the regulator's job. In principle, that's a good thing. Obviously, if you violate any of the regulations, then that's a very big problem. But in principle, getting a good regulator in who understands how the markets play is something that should be appreciated.
That is, there are plenty of people who are successful, as however you've defined, and credentialed, since you all seem to be going by credentials, who are willing to do this job free for the country, having an end, doing it in a proper, clean manner with the highest levels of transparency and probity. There is no dearth of such people. The former governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Dr. Raghuram Rajan, was one such. There have been many chief economic advisors, including the current chief economic advisor, who have given up their position, who have had no such issues. So let us not even get down that path of, you cannot get people unless and until they can have some shady investments in some obscure funds, and we have to put up with it so that we can.
No, but let's take for a moment your charge that it's an obscure fund with shady investments. The fund itself has put out a statement to say that not once did they invest from the time the fund was started up till the time it was wound down. They never invested in any Adani counter. The charge is that she made money off Adani chips. The fund itself, we don't have the investment record in front of us, but they've put out a formal statement which has to be taken at face value. They're saying, we never invested in any Adani counter.
Like I said, you are not a lawyer the last time I checked. It is an allegation that has been made. Okay, even if that were to be true, and I heard Mr. Prasad's almost political bhashan, I thought this was I think he mistook this for some Bihar political rally. But why, my simple question, fine, she may be absolutely innocent. I do have a lot of respect for her. Why not an inquiry? Why are you scared of an inquiry? Why? The first thing anybody would have done is to say, I recuse, I step aside, and allow for an impartial, objective inquiry, and that will prove that I am clean. Simple. Why has that not happened? Why did she not order an inquiry after the exit poll scam that we highlighted, when volumes doubled? What was that conspicuous silence about? This is why. It is in this context that it leads to certain apprehensions and certain doubts about Ms. Bush's position as the head of the securities market regulator. I'm sorry to say, but today, as things stand now, because of her behavior, she has lost trust and confidence of 50 million investors as well as the opposition.
You're saying she's lost the trust and confidence of investors. The markets there was a concern that the markets could crash this morning through the trade. There was volatility, there was an initial dip, most of which was recovered, and the markets seem to be fairly stable. I mean, the whole idea that this would lead to chaos and panic didn't seem to unfold in that fashion.
If one day were a trend, then I think you and I would be very savvy market investors. So just hold your horses. I think the real question is today, the fact that we're even debating and discussing this, the fact that there was some trepidation in the markets, what does that tell you? That there are questions being asked. Isn't it not in the national interest to put this issue to bed? I want foreign investors. I want the stock markets to do well. All of us want funds to come in. Why? Why is everyone from a former union minister to industry bodies such as the Indian Venture Capital Association and the ANFI coming out and batting for an individual? Why not get an inquiry done?
Okay, you've made that point about an inquiry. I want you to respond to Ravi Shankar Prasad's charge and the BJP's allegation that Hindenburg Research is funded by George Soros, who seems to have an axe to grind against this government, seems to have an axe to grind against Indian democracy, and is seen by the government as being a destabilizing force.
I think it was the British intellectual Samuel Johnson who said patriotism is the last refuge of you can complete it. So I think fine. Even if that allegation is true, come let's conduct an inquiry. Please do conduct an inquiry and find out if Hindenburg is funded by George Soros or some other Soros or whatever, whoever it may be. Conduct an inquiry, please.
Okay, what's the next step from the opposition lens on this?
It is. I think this is a serious matter, and I say that with a lot of responsibility as someone who has come from the private sector to public life, as someone who actually bats very heavily for getting talent from the private sector. I think it is very, very important that we do not let such issues roil this whole process of getting talent into public life. It is very, very important. So my simple suggestion is, Ms. Butch, please recuse or resign. Let there be an inquiry. We will have to, the parliament committees will have to take over to ensure that there is an impartial inquiry done. And we will promise and guarantee an impartial inquiry, absolutely an objective inquiry from our side. All we are saying is allow that to happen.
Okay.
Let's put this to rest.